This week on the Erotic Awakening Podcast, 10 years of the Erotic Awakening Podcast, raising kiddos and kitchen appliances.
We'd like to thank our latest Patreon supporters.
We enjoy creating this and recording this podcast, and we hope you enjoy listening to them.
When you become our patron, it gives us the chance to apply more energy towards creating.
For as little as $1 a month, you can not only support the podcast, but also gain access to special content.
Head over to patreon.com/Erotic Awakening to take a look at the options.
Regardless, thanks and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Erotic Awakening, an exploration of all things erotic. If you are offended by adult topics or prohibited by law, we recommend you stop listening.
When?
Right now.
Right the fuck now.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dawn.
Ooh, it got warm in here.
I'm glad that you're enjoying the warm. There's a wind gusting of about 9 million miles out there right now.
It is windy out there, but I'm warm.
As a matter of fact, it is so darn windy that we have a guest at our house because they couldn't fly out.
We do have a guest at our house because, the plane got canceled and he can't get out till tomorrow morning. He was at Midwest Olympus, which happens here in Columbus. And it was a great time. I got to vend there for a little bit yesterday. So It was a good time. Should have gone.
I stayed home like a slug instead.
We drink a lot, don't we?
Yes.
Tea, water.
Coffee, Cokes. We don't drink that much Coke. So, Dawn, our question of the day is dealing with the idea. This one came from a listener, Lexi Lee. How do you keep the kink alive while raising kiddos full time?
Luckily, we don't have to worry about that right now.
Anymore.
So one of the perks of getting a little older is our kids have been out for a while. So, but we did start this when you and I got together 20 years ago. The kids were 12 and 8 or something like that. So our exploration into kink, we had kids at home. So it was a little difficult. You like me to be loud, so that's a little difficult. But
that was one of the things. Yep.
So we found parties to go to. We started support groups. Luckily, the kids had their dad that they could go to every other weekend. So we did have that every other weekend that we could do. Yeah.
So part of it, I think, and even if you're not in a situation with shared custody, finding that babysitter, finding a way to have some alone adult time where you can forget about the kids for a little while, super valuable. And the nice thing about that, and what you and I did with that, because it was a very focused amount of time, we will not have the kids with us from this time to this time. That gave us the opportunity to turn full tilt into Kinkland and to be very focused on, all right, from at 5 p.m. when somebody picks up the kids, we're putting on the collar and you're going to stay in slave mode until Saturday at 9 p.m. when the kids come back. And during that time, we're going to go to this party. We're going to play with this thing. And you get to think about it leading up to that, right? You get to say, what are we going to do that special weekend? What are the problems that we have now? And I don't want to segue into that, but one of the problems we have now is we have so much time with no kids, so much time with the fact that we work at our dungeon, right? It's easy to play whenever we want. So we don't. So you don't put it in the energy of say, let's make sure we play Saturday because we want to have a chance to play for the next month.
Right.
So that's one of the benefits of having kids and having to work around them is you make very dedicated plans how you're going to work around them.
Absolutely. So you get to fantasize about what you want to do and make the plans and, and all like that. So, and that really worked for us. And the other thing that worked for us there at the beginning, we made sure to play like 10 minutes each night before bed. We had the little, if I remember right, we had the little pain sticks. You had the little claws. And like for 10 minutes, it wouldn't even be sex play. It would be 10 minutes of like power exchangey BDSM, really, really quiet. And then you would call done and we'd be done and I'd have to roll over and go to sleep. Right. So it wasn't about the orgasm. It wasn't about that. It was just building that energy for that little 10-minute pocket. And that was really neat. You learned how to spank with fingertips so that it would make no noise. Right. So it was more like that instead of like that. Well, for anybody listening, it was more fingertips instead of palm of the hand. So we learned how to do quiet things, but it was also very powerful for us because we're in power exchange to just have me go to the bedroom and kneel for 10 minutes. Right. So we'd get home from work and we tell the kids to leave us alone for 10 minutes. Don't yell in our face as soon as we walk in the door, give us 10 minutes. We'd go into the bedroom, take off all our electronics. I would kneel for you. You would put a piece of yarn around my neck or my collar or your hands, or just put your hands on my shoulders, or just look at me with your hands on your knees. You would just look at me and make that eye contact. And we were able to keep that going. I mean, it was important enough for us to figure out how to do things to keep that energy going.
Yep. And one of the aspects that I always think about when people say, how do I keep the kink alive when we've got kids in the house? Well, everybody, regardless of whether you're kinky or not, how do you keep your sex life alive when you got kids in the house? Well, you do it the same way. You look, when the door's closed, the door's closed. Knock on the door before you come into mommy and daddy's room, or mommy and mommy's room, or daddy room, whatever. This is our private time, and you as parents are allowed to have private time.
Absolutely.
And part of it is just making sure that which is an effect of kids anyway, is you got to stick to that calendar. All right, kids, you're going to bed at 9 o'clock, 9:30, me and mom will wind down. 9:30, mom and I are going to go in the bedroom. We're going to fuck like rabbits. You may not tell the kids that part, right?
Probably
but tell them, look, at bedtime, it's bedtime. It really depends on the age of the kids, right? If you got little itty bitty kids, they don't understand that kind of stuff. And you have to be somewhat flexible. But again, having somebody else that you can give that responsibility over to, whether it's a sitter or a parent or whatever, and take some time away from the kids so that you can re-engage in a nice kink life.
Mm-hmm. And even when, even though we didn't partake in it, there are some parents that become friends with other parents, and they switch off on who watches the kids that weekend, right? So, or there's an older kid in the group of one of them that'll babysit for everybody so they can go to a party, or, something like that. There's creative ways to do it, but it's very important and very healthy that if kink is important to you, to make that time, even if it's just the little 10-minute blips that we used to do. So, yeah.
And the fun thing is, as you listen to the podcast, you can start, if you have little kids, start listening to the podcast now and listen backwards. And you'll hear about how to deal with kids when they're teenagers and how to deal with kids when you run into them at play parties. We've had all those experiences.
Oh, yes, we have. So
there you go.
Yay. What do you think? Head over to our Facebook group.
I just told you what I thought.
I know.
I'm not going to head over to our Facebook group.
I'm asking the people listening.
Oh, our podcast listeners.
So head over to our Facebook page, Erotic Awakening Podcast.
All one word.
And share your thoughts.
So, Dawn, not a ton to go over on the notes today, even though we just came back from a 3-week hiatus.
We did.
Took a couple weeks off of the old podcasting.
That was long. I was getting a little antsy. I was really hoping we could record today because I'm.
You were getting a little
doing this podcast.
But and the funny thing is, because we've taken a hiatus, not a ton of stuff to talk about. You'd think it'd be the opposite, but instead, we've just been disconnected for a little bit, and that's okay.
And I don't know if it's because we just stepped back from PXS and BTL, so we're taking a breather. I've just jumped into vending again, so a lot of my focus is on getting things together and all that wrapped, all that put together. We're busy here at the space. I'm not sure what happened, or we hit 10 years and went, what the fuck? And just took a breather for a moment.
I think part of it for me is we just wrapped up putting out the polyamory toolkit, and we've been focused on that for a while. And, as you put that done on a project, I've just been leery on starting the next thing, even though this is not the next thing. Mm-hmm. It's just been nice to step away from everything for a little while. And I've had a couple of weekends now where people have said, what are you doing this weekend?
Nothing.
And really digging that doing nothing. Now, it's suggested that the go get shit done attitude will start to reinvigorate itself a little bit. We'll see. We have started, and can't say we've done nothing in the background, right? We've got a bunch of podcast episodes interviews lined up on the episode, on the podcast.
Project lined up.
Got the whole interview process, how we're going to get interviews and the technology behind it, and all straightened out so it becomes very automatic, very easy to schedule. Calendar scheduling people we're busy, they're busy. That's all automated. Loving that.
Yep. So, but we do, you're relaxing and playing some Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm putting together, I just started apprenticing. I may have said it on the last show. I just started apprenticing to Arcane, who does Arcane's Attic, which is all floggers. So I'm now a woodworker and leather worker. That was not on my plan, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'll be out there in the workshop tomorrow, lathing handles that look like dildos that I get to create and sand, and
Mhm.
it's actually a little fun job.
Cool.
So, and then like
And
I
yeah,
said, lining up vending stuff.
I've seen how Arcane will sit at an event and he'll sit there with his leather working stuff and just kind of sit there and braid, I guess. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, it's it'll come to me in a second.
But you do the same thing when you're sitting around the house with your plastic bags. You doing whatever the hell you do with those plastic bags.
I do. I cut plastic bags for my sister and knot them together so that her and her friends can crochet them for mats for the homeless.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that. I crochet scarves. I'm getting ready to start crocheting lap blankets for my sister to donate. And so I do the same thing. And I know Torx heads. That's what they are. Torx heads on the floggers. And I know how to do that now. So I may be doing the same thing when I'm vending. I do boot bling. That's my plan, is to do wire wrapping and boot bling while I'm vending. So I have something to do with my hands. Otherwise, I play my little games on my phone, and that's a waste of time. I'd rather do something crafty.
And the funny thing is, I said that earlier today, is that, I feel lazy because I'm just kind of just sitting around on the computer playing games. Mm-hmm. And is it a waste of time or is it rejuvenation?
I think there's a fine line. I think rejuvenation, what you're doing, I think is rejuvenation. If I play 1 or 2 or 3 games, that's rejuvenation. It's when I realize I've been playing for an hour and nothing else got done. Mm-hmm. Then I start feeling like it's a waste of time.
All right. If this is what you do, don't take this personally. For me,
yes,
I'm going to start getting worried if I start listening to laugh track television shows.
Yeah.
Television shows that have the candid laugh track in there. At that point that I'm watching, I'm sure that it's a great show and that I'm just a retard and I'm not classy enough to enjoy it. But the Two Broke Girls,
I think I've watched a half a show.
I flipped through that stuff and it's like not my taste, but it feels like a waste of time. It doesn't feel like
I get what you mean, and
millions of people love that show. So what the hell?
It's still on the air, right? So millions of people take breaks that way. You don't take breaks that way. If you start taking a break that way, I'll be pushing you to find a therapist.
Fair enough. Or start a new relationship.
Oh yeah, so you can watch it with them because it's not my thing.
No, I thought to take up the spare time.
Oh yes.
Our Random Erotic Awakening Instagram follower is Piggy Invasion.
Find us on Instagram and see the picture of the day as Erotic Awakening.
So earlier today, Dawn, we did our sexy dares, oral, all on me. I win. But now we're going to do sexy truth.
You win, but I like to give. That was a win for me too.
Well, good. Keep winning. Oops, that's a dare.
Especially the first one.
I feel like that was a win for me, to be honest. But that's fine.
Did you get yours? I'm getting mine.
All right, okay. You go first this time. Mine has only got 5 words, 6, 7 words, 7 words.
Okay. Let's see.
Sexy truth question.
What's the biggest lie you've told in order to get someone into bed?
Oh,
Do I?
Even though it was unsuccessful, that I'm not married.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Many years ago.
More than 20 years ago?
Yes.
Thank you. Because with me, you don't have to do that, right?
Exactly. Many years ago, I was that guy.
Wow. So I knew that about you.
Yes.
You were that guy. You're not that guy anymore.
I am glad to say I'm not that guy anyway, but I absolutely have lied to get somebody in bed. And I've used no, I'm not married. We're separated.
Yeah. Wow. No. And I don't think I've ever lied to get someone into bed. But I didn't do a lot of dating until after I met you. And again, I don't have to lie to get somebody into bed, right? I'm married. Yes, he knows. Do you want to fuck me? That tends to work. Does he know? Does he not know? They don't care.
Good point. Most of the time. I think
most of the time. That is true. That is true.
Yeah, there's some modifications to that. I've been told that sometimes some people find married guys more attractive and married women more attractive because it won't be that it's just a fuck and it won't be something else.
Right.
I don't know. We do polyamory instead. Dawn, my question for you is, what is your favorite part?
What is my favorite part?
Of foreplay.
Oh, my favorite part of foreplay? Dirty talking.
Oh, no kidding.
I like the dirty talk.
Fair enough. So noted.
If it goes with touching and stroking and licking and biting and everything else that goes with that, that's great. But the dirty talk turns me on.
You listening, podcast listeners? Very good. Good to know. So before we get into the end of, actually, we are going to talk a little bit about our topic in just a moment. I get to scratch this thing off.
Which
but
one? Okay.
You'll find out in a minute.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But currently, apparently, new people are still subscribing to that newsletter, even though we're not even talking lately.
Yeah, international.
And
more than once.
like
that.
Local and international. Wow, we are all over the fucking place.
Aren't we?
So you got to picture this map in your head. Our first listener is from Edmonton, Canada. That's Jess.
And that's like far west Canada. Not super far, but mostly far west Canada. We have Liz Love from Columbus,
Ohio.
So
now back here. And since we're already here, Lilith from Columbus is also a new listener.
Margot Lane from Dayton, which is only about 90 minutes from here.
And you're thinking, well, that's not so international. But now Marie from Sweden.
Yes, so that is awesome. So get your shout out, head over to eroticawakening.com, and you'll find a link to the Erotic Awakening newsletter, which is on my list to do. Haven't done yet. You'll get one soon.
Maybe.
You
know what? You're really not signing up for the newsletter.
You're not. You're signing up for the shout out.
I mean, we'll do a contest or something on occasion. No, not at all. So Dawn, the question of the random Reddit after dark that came up. I think you plugged this one in, or did I plug it in?
You must.
I think I plugged it in.
I think you did.
You must choose one kitchen appliance to always use in any way during sex. What do you choose and why? Unfortunately, always use. Yeah. I didn't catch that before. I can picture a kitchen appliance to use for sex.
And what counts as an appliance? Does it have to plug in?
No, I would think that a hand blender would be an appliance. I don't know if we have one of those. Egg beater? Is that what that is?
That's an egg beater. Yeah. No, we don't have one. I use a fork. A fork every time. Would that count as an appliance, though?
I don't know who. I guess it's up to us to decide.
Okay.
I'm looking around in our kitchen in my head, and the K-cup machine. Well, I'll always have a cup of coffee with the sex, or after sex. I can live with that. We don't have a fondue pot. That'd be awesome.
It would be.
I got no idea.
I don't know. So we have a stove, a dishwasher, a toaster oven. I don't know. But the one thing that I thought of, but we don't own, and it have to have a modification.
Okay.
It's an electric can opener.
Okay.
Right? I was thinking about this when I was doing the notes earlier, because I would take the blade off because I don't want to be cut with it.
Right.
Right. But if you straddle it and sit on top of it, the handle goes down and it vibrates.
Huh. You just say, go ahead and have fun with that one.
But otherwise, depending on how we describe it, I would say wooden spoon.
Oh, yeah.
If we counted utensils as appliances, I would go with a wooden spoon, but I don't know. I don't know that that's an appliance. So electric can opener without the blade.
Fair enough.
Otherwise, you've got a blender. Oh, aren't there things called magic bullets that are like thin blenders?
What?
Well, it's just the size of it, right?
I know what a magic bullet is.
Wouldn't it fit? Couldn't I fuck myself with it?
No, a magic bullet is those little vibrator eggs.
No. There's little blenders that are like tube-like. And I think they're called magic bullets to pulse things.
I'm going to need another 3-week break after this podcast.
I can perv some stuff.
Apparently. Not only can you perv that stuff, you can also perv these tentacles. Because I ain't got no food on boobs, even though we're in the kitchen this episode. But apparently, Bomb the Mike sent in a tentacle wearing a kitty mask.
That was so cute.
That was cute. That's fucking hilarious, actually.
And then Brooklyn V, so I wonder if she listens to our podcast anymore. She used to. Sent in, it was a body painted tentacles. So it was like green and pink body paint. So it was like green body paint on the person, and then the green squid, the green octopus with the tentacles all around them. That was really hot. So
cool.
It was cute.
And then Kitten Flo sent in a tentacle alien that you have to kiss. And apparently to save the world, you have to kiss this tentacle alien creature. But I didn't really need the reason.
I saw it this morning. That was pretty hot.
Yeah. Save $1 on gas and you'd be willing to kiss that.
Exactly. So Pretty Taboo sent an Etsy link with tentacle pins. So kind of like the jar that I have here. So
absolutely like that jar.
Tentacles.
At first I thought you were showing me a picture of that jar.
Yeah. So except they have a few more colors. Some of these are purple in my glass because I painted them purple. But in that one, there were some blue ones and red ones and purple. So I may have to invest. And then, but you know this glass, right? This was actually given to me from somebody from Canada that came to PXS.
Cool.
I wish I could remember who it was. That was about 5 years
Probably
ago.
it was Penguin. Remember Penguin?
Oh, yeah.
Probably was.
Could be. Awesome. And then you don't know this one.
No, I don't know that one.
I haven't read it yet. Kaya sent me a demon story. So it's a demons with multiple arms.
I see. And you have not read that yet?
I have not read it yet. So she sent me a link to it on Literotica, which I did not know still existed.
It does.
I need to get on there. I used to have stories on there, and then I had to pull them all off because we wrote sex stories and Power Exchange. And all my stories that were on Literotica ended up in sex stories and Power Exchange. So per the publisher, we had to pull them off of Literotica. So you can't give them away for free if they're in a paid for book.
Makes sense, I suppose.
According to publishers, but we self-published our third book, so we can do what we want to with it.
There you go. Go buy it. We're not going to give it away for free.
Exactly.
So Dawn,
we say that, right? But we are teaching a workshop this Saturday. I don't know why I said Wednesday. This Saturday here at the space, we're doing the polyamory toolkit, and I think it's 3-hour long workshop, and we're going to go through the book and go over some of the tools. So, if you want to hear it firsthand, come out to the workshop.
That's here in the Columbus, Ohio on February.
I think it's March 1st.
March 1st, you're probably right.
It's this Saturday. So, yep.
It's 2019.
Too long to find it.
The funny thing is, because this podcast is now 10 years old, shit that we've announced
10 years ago, 8 years ago.
We didn't say the year.
Ago.
We didn't know that we'd have to put the year on it. So people showing up going, where's the class on that thing?
Right.
Sorry, that was 5 years ago. So Dawn, we can't sit here and podcast all day. We have to get packed for the Leather Leadership Conference in Atlanta.
We do.
On
I'm
March
looking
15th.
forward to that. So LLC in Atlanta, it's more for leaders in the poly communities, the kink communities, the leather communities, people that present, people that produce, people that whatever, right? You can just run a damn round table if you wanted to and be part of that, or not run anything but be thinking about it and show up. So we'll be teaching how to be entertaining presenters. And are we doing the podcast class this year or something else? Do you remember?
I think we're doing something else, actually.
I think we're doing something else. So so I know we're doing how to be an entertaining presenter, and we love that event because it's not just kink skills. So it's so that we can hone our skills as presenters and podcasters and producers and
running groups and all that kind of stuff. That's what it's about.
Yeah, running venues. So all that type of stuff. And it's really, really awesome. Met some great people there. And we get to see Master Cecil and Darcy again. Which
is awesome.
Yay.
Who've been on the podcast.
And they have. And I'm going to be talking to somebody from Louisville about vending down in Kentucky. So I'll be talking to them at the Leather Leadership Conference.
Awesome.
So it'll be fun.
So as you can see, if you're watching the video, I've got my little my phone here in my hand, and I've just been kind of glancing through some of these podcasts that we've done over the past 10 years.
Oh, yeah?
As of February 12th, I think we decided it's been 10 years that we've been podcasting.
It's been 10 years. Hard to believe.
It's absolutely hard to believe that, because I remember being at Winter Wickedness or Cope, one of the two AIS events, talking to Gray Dancer and saying, damn it, we should just do it. Let's just do this podcast.
We were vending at the time. Remember? So we were vending. It's been 10 years since we've been vending. And we were vending at the time, and we had these huge blankets. And I bet you don't have one in here, but that's okay. And we call them Kadishti blankets. So these huge satin blankets that had a single diamond cut in it. That's probably, I don't know, each side was probably about 4 inches. And he was podcasting, right? So he does Ropecast, doesn't he?
He used to do Ropecast. Now he's rebranded it.
Has he rebranded it? Okay. So, but anyway, he interviewed us about this blanket that we had set up and what in the hell was it? And we decided we wanted to do the same thing. So we copied Great Answer and went off and did a podcast.
And it's been really interesting to see that at the time, it was Polyamory Weekly, Ropecast. Those were really the podcast for the kink and poly community. Since then, we've seen other huge poly podcasts come out. Multiamory, which was on our little network for a while. Our own podcast. Obviously, we're at 10 years and getting close to 500 episodes. And podcasting is all over the place now, right? It's not like there's 10 other podcasts, kink, and a couple that are nearly exactly like ours from a format perspective. Cool. More the merrier, apparently.
True. Though there are a lot out there that sound interesting, and I go to download them, and there's only like 4 episodes.
Yes.
Or 5 episodes, and that's kind of sad. But and then I have people that'll come up to us and go, oh, I just found your podcast. I started at the beginning, and I'm like, okay, so if you listen to one a day, we have 475. It will take you a year and a half listening to one a day to catch up. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Because I want to do, I'm doing the questions of the day, transcribing the questions of the day over the last 10 years. And again, if I transcribed one a day for the next year and a half, I would get done. That's a long ass time.
That is a long ass time.
So, wow.
So I don't know that I've got really anything else to say about the podcast being 10 years old. It's interesting, but you just keep going. You try and gain some level of consistency, and I recognize we just took a 3-week break, but
it is not consistent.
No.
I'm very well aware of that.
And the podcast, like our relationship, has morphed and changed over the years, and it's really interesting. You can hear as we go through the podcast. My relationship with Slave Bat starts and ends. My relationship with my collared submissive Kaya starts and ends.
With the dog that we had, Elsie.
Yeah.
You could hear her collar in some of the beginning episodes. You can hear, it wasn't Dusty. It had to have been our Archimedes that would climb across the table as we're recording.
Those are pets of ours, in case you're curious. Those aren't slaves.
Yes. So you guys that have been listening, you've been through our past dog, Elsie. You've been through the current dog, Ginger, that we've had for 5 years. And you can hear their collars on our recordings sometimes. The cat, we had Archimedes, and then we had Claire, and then we had, the newest 2 aren't on the podcast because we podcast at the space. So you guys were with us when we had the room, right? Before we had the room, when we had the room, now that we have the space. All the presenting we've done. Holy shit.
The creation from talking about power exchange and how important power exchange is to us, going through the contest,
the title, absolutely.
Going through Great Lakes Power Exchange, winning a contest, international, losing a contest, and using that podcast as a blogging platform for that. Think about the fucking Power Exchange Summit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Creating a Power Exchange event and talking about how that's gone. And then after 7 years,
8,
turning it over to somebody else. So now the podcast will be about what it's like to go to an event you don't run, that you helped create.
Beyond the Love, our polyamory summit, same thing. We started that a year and a half after Power Exchange Summit, and now we don't have it either. So, we've gone through all these changes, writing the books, getting the books out, the Kink Starter cards. Holy cow. This has documented all of that.
Yeah.
Documented when we had kids, when we didn't have kids, the granddaughter coming along. Wow.
That didn't make it much on the podcast.
But no, it didn't make it much on there, right? But that was 8 years ago. So, the questions that, or the comment that someone made about how they didn't think we were as old as we were, and then they found out how old we are, that was years ago.
Yeah.
And that they were surprised we did a podcast like this.
So we're going to have to take a look at some of those earlier episodes, 20, 30, 40, 50, right? And say, one of the really interesting things is how your perspective changes. And I've talked about this before, right? My perspective on TNG when I first started, that's groups for people that are 19 to 35 or 19 to 40, depending on your area. I was very opposed to those when we first got started because I was 35 when we started getting kinky. Couldn't go to the TNG group, right? So the idea that the people that were teaching me, couldn't teach people that were younger than us. It just didn't make sense to me then, right? Now that I'm way out of their age range, but our kids are of that age range, it makes more sense to me. And in dealing with people that are of an age range of that, I've had a collared submissive, and I've dated people that are in that age range, and there is some shit that we do not connect on, right? That I understand why you want to talk to your peers about that shit.
Absolutely. So our the way we think about things have changed over time. But if you look at all the people that we've interviewed as well. Some of them aren't around.
Oh yeah.
Some of them, their voices are on our sound bites, right? And they are no longer around, as in they passed.
Yeah.
So, and we've lost some house members, that have passed, and, things like that. So, wow.
Flag comes to mind.
Flag, right.
We interviewed Flag along quite a while ago, and then he put out a book, The Forked Tongue, interesting book, interesting podcast. Master Rick, who used to be part of House Meta, right? They were on the podcast once, and now he's passed. And
Donald Michael Craig.
Yeah.
We interviewed him down in Southern Indiana. So a big sex magic author.
Right.
So, and he's passed. And yeah.
So that's another interesting legacy of the podcast, is that there's some history there where you get to capture a little bit of a person. I mean, it's only a little tiny itty bitty slice of them, but it's a piece of their life that continues on.
Absolutely. So what would you say, and I know this is going to be hard because it's hard for me too, what would you say would be one of your favorite podcasts?
I don't know, but the one that comes to mind is, off the top of my head, is way in the beginning. We interviewed Jay Wiseman.
I was going to say that,
and I can't remember what it was about. But Dan, it was just great to have that conversation. And part of the takeaway for me was to realize it was a great conversation, but we could be involved. We were peers in that conversation, right? It didn't feel like we were sitting in the presence of some rock star, which, if you don't know it, Jay Wiseman, he is a rock star of the kink community. At least he was. I don't follow him anymore. I don't know what he's doing. But
he wrote SM 101.
Yeah, he wrote SM 101, right? He's like he was part of the Janus Society when it was the only organization for BDSM out there, right? So to have that conversation, I don't know why that one sticks out in my head, but it's one that does stick out in my head. But, and I'll say another one that sticks out in my head is talking to somebody about, they liked to go out to places. It was a man and his, I think they were a married couple, and they like to go to places, and she would give random people blowjobs and have sex with random people. And he would just be there. He wasn't even watching. He was just there, right? He would take off while that happened. And I remember interviewing them and talking to them, and the interview, as we're talking, shifted into her saying on the podcast, how about if I just suck your cock? Right. And it's not because, look at what I got. It was just such an interesting conversation to be having. I really don't take it as how great it was that I'm getting a blowjob out of having a podcast. It was more of what an interesting perspective. It was a great reflection of myself to say, I don't want blowjobs from random people that are trying to pick me up during a podcast. That's not one of my kinks. And it was just really interesting reflection. And I really have a hard time explaining why.
Yeah, no, I get that. And we get to do reflections while we interview people, right? So, I can remember the episode with Laura Antonou, and we ended up with 2 of those, right?
Do you remember we were doing a pre-show before we interviewed Laura Antonou?
Yeah.
We were talking on the podcast about how we would interview Laura Antonou. And we were in this little business center at the hotel because we was at an event.
Oh, yeah.
And she came in to use the printer as we're talking about we're going to be interviewing her. We didn't know who the fuck she was.
Right.
And she's just in there listening. Apparently because we were saying her name. She's like, I know, who's this chick who's being all nosy and shit. That was hilarious.
I remember that. And then we interviewed her, and we did 2 interviews. We did one that's the normal, ask her about the marketplace book, and things like that. And then we did a second one that was much more personal and more in depth. That one didn't take.
Yeah.
So we ended up having a really good conversation with her, but it didn't get saved for the podcast. Something happened to the recording equipment between the 2 minutes of stopping one and starting another. So we got the basic one of the questions that everybody asked her and lost the other one. And then we had another one that I'm reminded of is the conversation we had with Elwood last year about the Dance of Souls. And you weren't sure if you were going to do the flesh hook or not with the Dance of Souls. And he asked you, will you regret it in the morning or something like that if you don't do it? Mm-hmm. And that kind of changed your mind. We may not have talked to him if we weren't doing the podcast, just because you're always ships in the night at events. The podcast and interviewing people, whether they're stars or authors or just someone random that we really think they have something to say, we end up sitting down and having those conversations with people, right? Yep. So I really love how this helps us reach out to people. And then again, we've got 20 years experience doing this. So we get to share all the shit that we've been through. And it's just really neat to me how this reaches so many people on so many levels.
Yeah.
In so many places. I mean, anyway, I'm going to get all
weird.
Yes. Sorry.
You forgot that your favorite podcast episode is actually the one where we interviewed Naylin.
Oh, I loved that one. I got to figure out my tentacle sex fetish.
2 other things that came to my mind. One of them is, as we're doing the podcast, the very first podcast that we ever did was fuck it, let's just do something.
It was a polyamory roundtable.
It was a polyamory roundtable that Karen, who was a partner of mine at the time and has been a partner of mine throughout the entire podcast, her to realize she can't listen to the podcast. It disturbs her to listen to the podcast because
now or even then.
No, after, I don't know, into the first 20 or 30 episodes, she stopped listening. And that was the rule from then on. She didn't listen to the podcast because you and I are very vulnerable and very open about what we do on the podcast. And she's like, I don't need to hear it on the podcast. I just, she understands because we're polyamorous. She understands that I put my dick in other people. She didn't need the details of the angles and the movements and the squishy bits. And we talk about that on the podcast.
We talk about all that on here. And that's just like Big D doesn't listen to the podcast. Mm-hmm. He expects that if there's something important going on, he doesn't want to find out through the podcast. He'd rather me just tell him. And, and that's my preference as well. I'd rather tell him, and I'll tell him if I talked about him on the podcast. I'm like, you were on there today. So
where Kat, I think, actually likes the fact that I use her name on the podcast.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it'll start with nicknames, and then they're like, no, it's okay to use my name. That's cool. I just say K2 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, no, use my name. It's like, okay, fine, you're part of the show now. I think some people dig that as well. And I don't care one way or the other, but if this was a sitcom, we're the stars of the sitcom, but they're supporting characters, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of our polyamory expertise comes from at the expense of Big D and Karen and Kat and etc. Right? Yeah. At the expense of, so to speak.
No, but they do get talked about, and Big D will just roll his eyes a little bit, So okay, talking about me again. Don't get into my personal life. Yep. He's kind of a private person and doesn't want to be seen in a certain way. He'd rather people meet him first instead of learn about him through the podcast.
And the last thing for me on this is that one of the most important parts of this that continues to be important that I forget about, because I get tired of doing this podcast on occasion, as you well know. On
occasion, 10 years, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, especially when you got a list of 9 things to do, it's like, which one do we not do? How high do you want to put the podcast on there? Mm-hmm. And every time I think I'm getting done or I could skip this week, we have been very fortunate to receive feedback from listeners. I mean, yes, we appreciate that when you send us tentacle porn and food on boobs and cool shit like that. very much appreciate when you rate us on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify, which is where a lot of people find us now. We dig all that shit. But sometimes people write these little personal, this has been a key for me unlocking this aspect of myself. You guys, through your stories of good and bad, have been examples to what I want to get to, or have helped me through this thing, or have made it easier for me to get through a day, and all that kind of shit that inspires and energizes us to keep going. Look, I love the fact I see somebody toss us anywhere from $1 on our Patreon account, or subscriber for $10. All that shit's awesome. And we've even had people that have said, hey, we're going to be passing through town one day. Would you mind hanging out with us for a little bit? No, we'll hang out with you. And I remember somebody said, hey, I want to donate to the podcast. Cool, thanks. And handed us $100. I said, well, fuck, what do you want? Do you want a commercial or something? Do you want us to? No, fuck it.
So we went out and bought a new microphone.
Yeah. But this, just that kind of both energetic, there's the different energy feedback we get from people. Be it a kind word, or tossing a couple bucks at us, or fucking pulling us aside at Kinky College and saying, oh, are we being too loud? No, I just know your voice from the podcast. Thanks.
Yeah.
That shit's cool. It's an energy exchange, all of it.
And I was talking to somebody earlier today or yesterday. I'm not sure, and I'll have to think about it to remember who I was even talking to. But yeah, it had to have been at Midwest Olympus, because I was talking to different people. But anyway, I was talking about the orange hanky and how you wear the orange hanky, but also how through the podcast, I've been able to meet and play with different people as well, because you used to throw that thing out there, just ask me and you get to play with Dawn. And so I got to play with Bad Bunny.
Oh, yeah,
I got to play with Boy Chris. I got to play with, was it Crazy Heart? I think it was Crazy Heart up in Canada. So I got some play out of that too, which is weird, because it's weird because it wasn't what we call star fuckery.
Right.
It was someone being courageous, going, I think I'm gonna ask them to play, and me feeling like an object. So that feeds my fetish.
Right.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I got to meet some really good people.
Yeah. And no limit to the amount of experiences that we've gotten to participate in, or have pushed ourselves to participate in, rationalizing, well, it's for the podcast. Let's go to this event for the podcast. All right. I've said my say.
I've had a really good time, and I hope it keeps going. I've been missing recording. So, and I don't know why. Do I like to hear myself talk? Do I like to pass on information? I know you're going to get at least a giggle out of me while we do this.
True.
I don't know. Is it the truth or dare right now? Is it the questions? I think part of it is because we do things like these little truth things, right? Or we do the lists. And I get to learn a little bit more about you, even after all this time. I get to learn a little bit more about me, right? So... yeah.
One of my favorites was the 128 slave rules.
Yes.
Where a lot of them are laughable, but there were a couple of them in there that were hot, and there were a couple in there where you would say, oh yeah, I think that's hot as fuck. And I said, I have no clue what you're talking about. Why would that be hot? I've never even thought that you'd find that interesting.
And then I get to explain it, and it's
exactly.
Like, oh, I like that.
So there you go. There's podcast number 476,
maybe, I think.
Either way,
not sure.
10 years of doing this shit, and we're still not done talking.
We're still not done talking.
Nope. Bye, Dawn.
Bye, Dan.
We're still recording. If you don't
Are
know.
we?
Yes. You have to press that button again.
Which button do I have to press?
If you want to drive the little mousey,
all right.
Move the mouse. Where it says end stream. Click.
Ding.
Click end.